Well, hello. On behalf of Sponsor City Index, London South East and Hardman Co, you're very welcome. This is going to be a fascinating evening, I'm quite sure. Life Sciences, I've heard described as the strangest, scariest, sexiest, most interesting corner of the stock market. After oil and gas last time, I think it's going to be rather different and rather interesting. This comes at a time after London South East itself has had a great summer. I don't know if any of you have noticed, I hope you have. There is a newly launched website, and if you haven't been there a while, I do hope you will dive in and have a look. The site has been rebuilt from the bottom up. It is a really clever relaunch because it's familiar, and yet at the same time it's very much smoother and has a great look and feel, very clean, and a lot of clever technology behind it. They're still going through the process of debugging, but the page load speeds in particular are amazing, and lots of new features for you to try. For example, there's now streamed share prices. As long as you're registered, you can see those immediately. You don't need to be a paid subscriber for that, and there's a much improved watch list, and then of course all the forums and discussion points and features that people very much like on London South East. It's also great to report that page views are up pretty spectacularly, in fact up 50% in August, which of course is a time when you might expect them to be down, so that's a great achievement by Phil Thomas, the director there. I don't know, is Phil here? Give us a wave, Phil. He's at the back there, obviously exhausted from all that work on the website. So we're almost coming to the end of the 2019 season. We've just got one more event to go. I'll mention that at the end. And certainly this season has been very successful, according to your very kind feedback. Thank you very much indeed for that. And I do hope that you'll stay with us for refreshments, of course, at the end, and mingle with the speakers who I think will be with us for that. And I just should mention that Cathal Friel, the chief at Open Orphan, is on his way. He'll be joining us very shortly. Now tonight we're here for this event in partnership with our good friends at Hardman Co, and we certainly chose to partner with Keith Hiscock and his team because of their real expertise in this field that we're covering tonight in the life sciences area. So let's tap that straight away as we just have a quick introduction to investing in the cutting edge of commercial life science companies. Let's hear from Keith Hiscock, the chief at Hardman Co.
So our business has been going for 25 years. We have a team of 18 analysts with typically 25 years experience in their sector. As Martin will explain, we've got a team of 3 in the life sciences sector. And for those of you who haven't looked at our work, we write research about companies, paid for by those companies, that is widely available. So you can read our research by registering on our website for free. It's all free. You can read it by clicking on the links in the RNS announcements against the companies that we write about. You can read it if you're a user of Reuters Bloomberg through their libraries. You can read it by going on to Twitter and finding it from there. Umpteen number of ways you can read it. It's freely available. The important thing about our research is the quality and depth that we bring to it. We don't write fly sheets about companies, as you'll see when Martin comes and talks about the sector. We're recognised for the depth of our expertise in the things about which we write. All of our research sets out to give a very balanced view of the companies about which we write. So we look at the opportunities, we look at the risks, we look at the valuation of the business, and we look at the financial levers in the business. And so all the companies have got financial models. Now, one of the reasons that we do it that way is that we have some complementary businesses to investment research, for which we need to have a good reputation. So, for example, we're employed in court cases, expert witness in court cases for things such as valuing of companies. There's an argument about the valuation of companies, where there's an argument about the importance of an announcement from a public company. We're used for due diligence by private equity houses brokers, corporate finance houses. We're even employed by a stock exchange in Europe. If you want to list on this exchange, you have to get a report from us to the exchange. That's what we call bespoke up here. I should say in the corporate bit, on the left-hand column, not only do we write research, which is very widely distributed, we follow that up by helping companies to engage with investors, whether that be institutions on roadshows meeting companies, or whether that be sophisticated and high net worth individuals meeting companies through our forums or through our lunches. So we try to engage with as wide a audience of investors as possible. And then the third column on the right hand side is the tax enhanced business. So this is another area where we deploy our expertise as investment analysts in looking at businesses, funds and opportunities. And so the tax enhancers, you can understand, involve areas such as enterprise investment schemes, venture capital trusts, IHT schemes. So we write research about those, again paid for by the provider, which is widely available and free to anybody who wants to read it. But we complement that by helping wealth managers to choose which of those schemes or managers they might want to invest in, and we even help to train them as to how to go about making a decision. So all of these services use our experience as investment analysts and the depth of our experience of investment analysts, and there really isn't a team which has got a deeper level of understanding and expertise in this sector than the life sciences team. And so that's my cue to hand over to Martin.
Thank you, Keith. So I'm Martin Hall, and I lead the life sciences team at Hardman, as Keith has just said. I don't want to tell you too much about myself, but just as a way of background and hopefully giving you a guide that we have quite a lot of experience. My whole academic and working life has basically been involved in pharmaceuticals in one form or another. I trained as a pharmacist originally. I have a PhD in psychiatry or CNS-related disorders, and I've worked for a multinational drug company, albeit only for 3 or 4 years. I then transitioned into the city more years ago than I care to remember, but it was 32 years ago, and thoroughly enjoyed it and still do. I think what I brought with me, the key knowledge, was that pharmaceuticals is a global industry. When I joined, the stock market looked at UK companies only. So Glaxo, Phison's, Beecham, as it was, they were just looked at in isolation. And yet, most of their sales and certainly all their profits were coming from overseas markets. The UK was only 3% of the world market then. It's probably even lower today. So it was having the knowledge that you needed to look at the sector on a much broader basis than they used to be. Secondly, I brought with me an important knowledge of how to design clinical trial protocols. And I think that's still relevant today. And thirdly, a knowledge and understanding of the regulators. And there's never a year goes by without me learning something new from the regulators. So I understand and appreciate what the companies have to go through. In terms of achievements, I think the first one was really to help the institutional investors to look at the industry on a global basis. Secondly, I understood also that looking at the enormous number of companies in those days, and there were 70, 80 what would be called major pharmaceutical companies. Today there's only 30, so the need for industry consolidation. I was very fortunate, especially being a non-accountant, of being involved in the Accounting for Growth initial research report and also the book, which Terry Smith claims to have. But that was actually very important in my knowledge and understanding of companies. And that led really to the idea of how to value biotechnology stocks when we first wrote on that particular feature and how to risk adjust. And actually that model is mostly used in various forms today. As possibly one of my proudest achievements was unravelling the fraud at British biotech. And I don't bring that up with pride, but I bring it up because I think that did enormous damage, at least 10 years damage, to people like yourselves and also institutions investing in what is actually an incredibly exciting industry. And it took a long time to recover from that. You can all work out that I left university many years ago, and things change. And so whenever I've built and rebuilt teams in the city, I've never been shy to bring in young people with new expertise that add something to the team. So you obviously know I can't do all this alone. And in the audience, you'll find Dorothea Hill, who came to me from Oxford, and she's brought all the new world of genomics and epidemiology, and is a fantastic asset to the team, as is Gregoire. So this is our French connection, so we're not looking for Brexit, a medicinal chemist, and he spent a long time in the UK with cancer research technology, and he's brought the oncology specialty to the team. And of course, that between us, we do cover obviously an enormous number of ideas. So just to go on to life sciences, we call it life sciences because, as I said, when I started out, it used to be called health and household. That then got split into pharmaceuticals and biotech, and so broadly people understand that. Healthcare, which encompasses medtech, and then I've put on the end a slightly separate group, diagnostics and services. And these are all the areas that basically we look to cover under life sciences. I've put on some ideas about how they differ, global industry. There's plenty of opportunity for new entrants in the biotech field. And what you'll hopefully get from me tonight is that these are feeders of new technologies into big pharma. High risk, high reward. Healthcare sits sort of somewhere in the middle, lower barriers to entry. It's easier to go it alone in healthcare and medtech, but with the lower risk, you have lower rewards. And diagnostics, I've sort of alluded to on the end, lower barriers to entry. But the problem there is, unless you've got a portfolio of products, you're often single product, and commercialization of that in areas dominated by big players is extremely difficult. So, my key message there is differential risks for the different rewards. So, life sciences is an inspirational area to be in, but I thought, having heard my CV and how long I've been doing it, what gets me out of bed in the morning? And I just love learning about new technologies. And in doing that, I meet an incredible number of interesting people, whether they're CEOs of companies, chairmen of companies, we're talking global pharmaceuticals here, so some of the biggest in the world, right down to some of the smallest. Clinicians, it's just a very interesting area to be in. The other thing that we have done throughout all my time in the city and continue to do, it does give me enjoyment, believe it or not, but I do actually enjoy the fact we have a very good pharmaceutical database and continuing to build on that. And you'll see the relevance to that point in a few moments. The other thing I can say quite easily is I learn something new every single day. And then it's being able to join all these things together to be able to add value to you as potential investors. So it's a continually evolving industry and one that's really exciting to work with. I think there's more coming up on that. So the question then is, how do we add value? And I'll start with the one on the right, because this is just a typical example. So Keith says we write paid for research, but sometimes to get ourselves in front of people, we actually have to do a bit of freebie. And we wrote a note on AstraZeneca back in June. And this all stemmed from literally me getting out of bed. I think it was Friday, March the 29th, and seeing an announcement that AstraZeneca was raising $3.5 billion in the market. And for the life of me, I just couldn't understand why a major pharmaceutical company with sales in excess of $20 billion every year, supposedly profitable, if you believe their earnings, was unable or needed extra working capital. It also followed on from another observation I'd made only about 3 weeks before that, and that was that the market capitalization of AstraZeneca had exceeded that of Glaxo for the first time. And I honestly say, in all my working time in the city, outside obviously major M&A activity, I never thought I'd see that day, because Glaxo today sells 2.5 times the level of pharmaceuticals that AstraZeneca does. So that was inconceivable event to happen. So I put the two of those together, and Saturday morning for an hour I just checked, am I right? And actually, the more I delved into it, what was even more staggering is that AstraZeneca raised that $3.5 billion only 2 days after paying out $2.6 billion final dividend for the last financial year. So you just question what the company was up to. And it turned out they basically had no more working capital. They had to pay $675 million to license in a drug and had no more debt facility to be able to do it. And so my question was, where's all the cash gone? And this note explains it. So that's how we add value, we believe. Secondly, if I'd been giving this talk 2 nights ago, the one on the left, which is diurnal, that wouldn't actually have appeared on here. This is actually a direct result of my colleague Dorothea. She went to a meeting yesterday with a company, and they were actually saying that was one of the best notes that they had seen. And it was all down to the fact that we had done a little bit of lateral thinking. The company had had a very surprise negative result in clinical trials. And our question was, what had we missed? And this came on the back of very, very positive phase 2 data. So we went back and looked at the data available to us in the public domain. And what we found was that the 2 sets of data were presented. One was on a logarithmic scale and the other was on a linear scale. And the units on the y-axis were both different. So you were not comparing, you were comparing oranges and cheese, basically. completely wrong. And again, a bit of history, but I did win a mathematics prize actually I worked out it was 50 years ago this year. And rather than taking a book, as you used to do at school in those days, I actually had a slide rule. That was my prize. And I always kept it safe, and I wondered when it would be useful, and it finally came useful to write this report, because I had to convert all those log scales back to normal. And what we showed was essentially that we think that the CRO, the Contract Research Organisation, or the lab doing the tests had made an error, because all of the results were tenfold out in the second group. And that's what we reported in this note. Very interestingly, even with a negative clinical trial outcome, the regulators have still told Diurnal to go ahead and submit for approval, which almost indicates that actually we hit the nail on the head. So hopefully you can see with things like that, that's how we don't take, obviously we listen to companies, but we do try to make our own judgment and apply a little bit of important lateral thinking. So drug development, I'm sure you're all aware, there's a massive clinical need. You hear almost monthly the whole point about antibiotics. You hear a lot less about CNS. You hear about the need for CNS drugs. But as I said, it's many years ago I've been in the city and did my PhD. I don't really think we've made massive progress. It's incredibly difficult to show in a drug, in a short-term trial, a discrete behavioural change over a short period of time. It's just not going to happen. You've got to do really long studies. And of course, that's what puts all the majors off doing them. CNS now? Sorry, central nervous system. So schizophrenia, Parkinson's disease, dementia would be in that category. Everybody knows that we've got an ageing we have had a rise in the average life expectancy, so aging population. And that's largely because we've had drugs to treat cardiovascular problems. And so you live longer and you start to see other diseases. And of course, the two most common are things like stroke and cancers coming to the fore. I also put this up, and to be a bit provocative, personally, I think we have actually reached the peak in terms of male and female life expectancy. My own feeling is that it will actually start to trend back downwards from here. And I just say that from the simple observation, if you walk outside the door, down the street or at home, and you just look at the people walking around, it tells you that they are not going to live as long as, and it's all down to lifestyle, which brings them to point, diabetes and diet. And of course, the incidence of diabetes is, I'm sure you're all aware, is going up. So there's lots of opportunities, but equally, of course, we can't get away from the risks. And I'm not going to go through all this because they're quite well known. 10 years to make a drug. There is a low probability of success, which I'll come on to in a minute. The regulatory situation, and of course, capital. It's a very expensive process. I thought I'd just show you, this is going back to 1999, so this is part of our database coming to the fore. We actually have data back to 85, but just to get it onto the graph, these are all the FDA approvals over that period of time of what we call new drugs, new chemical entities, or the more modern term for antibody-based drugs, biopharmaceuticals. And it looks very impressive, and you can see a rise at the end. But actually, if you go back through our entire database, going back 32 years, on the next slide, you'll see the numbers. But it actually only equates, remarkably, to only one new drug per major company per annum. And if you've got sales of $40, $50 billion, one new drug per annum is not enough to grow. So they need to start looking elsewhere, which is why I'm using this to link big pharma into the smaller biotechs. And I thought somebody might ask me about costs. And so the costs of development of those drugs. So if you actually just take the enormous picture, so come back to where did that stat come from? So 959 drugs in that 2-year period were approved by the FDA. And if you add up all of the R&D spend that I can get my hands on, account for, it's $1.925 billion over that period, and that works out an average cost of $2.006 billion per drug. So it's very difficult for small companies to sort of fund those sorts of numbers. I have latterly done the stats just before I came here, and I've actually split it down by 5-year periods. And in 1995, the average drug to get to market was $745 million. And I've used the spend to 2015. Today, it's $2.8 billion, but the average over the entire period is 2. And you can see that drug companies have been spending, obviously, an increased amount of real spend on R&D, but the average of their existing sales has also gone up. But again, I think we're probably pretty much near the top now. I don't think it's sustainably going to go above 20%. So it highlights what I was really trying to get across, that big companies need biotech because of the numbers, but biotech needs the big companies as well. So investing, which is where we all come in. I thought I'd put up a few success stories. Of course, the focus is always on the failures, and I get really disappointed. Obviously, I'm a contributor to that because I have to talk about them. But I'm really excited by the industry, and therefore I really like to talk about the successes. I put up Shire rather reluctantly, because anybody that invested in Shire did extremely well. I have to say, as an analyst, I got it totally wrong for the whole period, because I didn't like them at IPO, because my background told me that the whole drug area they were working on for dementia was never going to work, and that proved to be right. but the market for some reason loved it. And it went up, and they used their money, their high share price, to buy other companies. The next thing they went into was amphetamines for children. Again, I didn't really agree with it, and I didn't like it. I thought, that will never take off. It took off. Got to the point where 1 in 5 American children were on amphetamines supplied by Shire, which is a staggering number. So sometimes analysts do have to hold their hands up and say they got it totally wrong. So good, well done if you invested in Shire and stayed there to the end, because you did extremely well. I've used as an example Abcam, because I thought that was a good example of a new technology that came on. You can see all those years ago, it's been a fantastic success story. And today there are about 80 drugs on the market derived from antibodies. And those drugs sell about last year sold $110 billion. So it's a tremendous success story. I also should highlight, being with my analytical hat on, you can see lots of little dips over here on the right-hand side. And the problem that Abcam faces is that it's going through a period of actually quite low growth. They're having to invest for the future. So their growth rate at the earnings level over the next 2 years and the last 2 years has been sub 10%. But the stock keeps trading up at around 38, 40 times multiple. And suddenly the market realizes that. And so every one of those dips is concomitant with the announcement of interim and final results. And I'm going to leave the last one to Shield, but I think Tim has got an interesting story. But it shows how you as an investor can make money out of this area. I also wanted to think, well, you would probably ask me anyway, what am I quite interested in? And these are not recommendations, but I think it's something that as interested investors you should look at in the future. Avacta, the way I'd look at Avacta is it's the same as Abcam 20 years ago, with 2 differences. Firstly, it's got a technology called Affimer as opposed to antibody. And Affimers can get into areas of the body and can get into the targets that very, very large antibodies cannot do. So there is a perfectly rational reason why they're going to work, and the company's pretty much proved it over the last 2 or 3 years. The second thing of interest is the business model, and it's completely different. So Abcam it's easy in hindsight. Abcam made the mistake when it did deals for its antibodies never to link it to a 1% royalty if anything ever came from that antibody. As I said, last year they sold $110 billion in the market. 1% of that would have been very, very nice. Thank you very much. Avacta, when it does deals, is actually its business model is to also have a licensing income, a future licensing stream. I've put up advanced oncotherapy because it's a very interesting juncture. It's managed to get to where it has today, scraped there, getting funding. But this company is going to have a new proton therapy machine, likely to treat first patients at the end of 2020. And it's got a fantastic facility in Harley Street, which is being kitted out as we speak. So it's got a new proton therapy, but the key difference is, I don't know if any of you saw the Horizon program recently, showing the one going into University College Hospital. It basically involves a staggering building. The thickness of the walls to protect from radiation is staggering. The machine had to be put in and the whole building gone up around it. It's well worth it. You can pick it up on iTube. And it just highlights how different advanced oncotherapy is. It's got the same machine, probably more precise, but difficult to say at the moment, but it looks as though it's going to be more precise. And literally, you just bring it in through doors this size, put it into the lift, and you go and build it. It's modular. So it's probably going to cost about 1/10 of the price of the one to put in University College Hospital. And I think it's just at a very interesting juncture. It will need a bit more money, but it probably won't need any more money for about 6 to 12 months.
I don't want to rush you.
Okay.
I want to allow just time for one or two questions.
Okay,
so
fine.
you can
So
just bring
I think this is virtually there. And I put the next one just to sort of show a spectrum. I put EKF diagnostics. And the interest here is, unlike, as I said on an earlier slide, companies only have one diagnostic tool that they can sell. EKF has a broad range available geographically, quite a lot of markets. In addition, whether you believe AI or not, it has a stake in Renalytics, which gives them. So you basically, by holding EKF, you have an exposure to AI if that is of interest to you, and that way you don't have to have exposure directly to AI companies. So just to finish, it's a fabulous industry to follow. Hopefully, I've been enthusiastic about it. But it's very enjoyable. Personal interest, I don't mean my personal interest, I mean I'm sure everybody in the room knows somebody in the family with an illness for which current medicine is not suitable or is not working. And so therefore there is a tremendous interest in families about medicines and medicines of tomorrow. You should be aware of the chances of success. You know, a drug in phase 1 clinical trial, history tells you it's only got a 1% chance of making it to the market. It's a number that people will argue with, but that's what the stats say. But equally, it's a high risk-reward situation. Management's key. You've got to believe in the management, and they will deliver. And from an investment point of view, so if we take Avacta as an example again here, it's really important for you to know and keep on top of the timing of the next capital increase. So if I've inspired you on Avacta today and you go away and do your due diligence, think I'd like to buy it, look at the share price. In the last 3 months, it's trickled down from 30p to 20p, and I have little doubt in my mind they're either on the road or about to go on the road for a capital increase. So you obviously want to time your buying immediately after the capital increase. And something we always come across, and you'll hear it tonight, all CEOs think their shares are cheap, but I thought I'd leave you with that one.
Thank you
very much indeed.
Well, there's an absolute wealth of knowledge there. I've not heard mention of slide rules for quite a few years. I know what it is, and I know it doesn't need batteries. Okay, so time for a couple of questions. One over here already, champing at the bit.
Your estimate of 2 billion.
Yes.
So that sits between Tufts' estimate of 2.78 billion, which was widely lampooned for including costs of failed drugs, and the JAMA estimate of 700 odd million, which was lampooned for the opposite reason. So did you include the costs of failed drugs or not in your analysis?
It's really simple maths. It's so what we do is we take, our database adds up the R&D spend of all the companies in our universe, and we cover 80% of the world market. So it wouldn't cover research R&D for an unquoted company. So quoted companies, including some very large multinational private companies like Boehringer Ingelheim in Germany, where we can get the data. But we cover 80% of the world market. Literally, we just add up all their numbers every single year at average exchange rates, put it all into dollars. So it's adding up those. For 32 years, it came to, 1,925 billion spend, divided by the 959 drugs that were approved by the FDA over the same period. That's where the 2 billion came from. Okay. But I tried to refine that with my numbers. So actually, I was probably even closer. If you look at the 10-year spend to 2015 and divide it by the approvals between, just get my numbers right, 2008 and 2018, because I've allowed for a 3-year lag between spend and being approved by the regulator. So if you were to do that in the last 10 years to 2018, it works out at 2.8 billion. So it's very much in line with that first number.
Yeah. I mean, but you're happy with it as an estimate? For me, it seems high. As you point out, most small companies don't have access to $2 billion. But of course, a lot of drugs, in fact, many small drugs these days are developed by small companies. And the majors are quite happy to let them do that and then buy them up later on.
So what you should be asking is, what are they wasting their money on?
Well,
yes, I'm asking that. Go on.
I think you two
And
need
of course,
to take this offline outside.
they avoid any
It's,
questions on that.
There's obviously a lot of issues here, and of course you have the expertise, and this is where obviously life gets quite tough for the average AIM investor who has to do all these sums. And I was thinking particularly of situations where there's a capital raising or something, but you've held the shares and they've gone down. You've got to decide whether to spend more money to stay in or potentially lose your investment, and that's quite a tough decision for people.
I don't think you lose your investment. The way I look at it, as a small, relatively small investor that's probably not going to have a percentage stake in the company, you know exactly how much that stake costs you, irrespective of whether it's 0.5 or 5%. That's what you're going to get out. There's your return. And I think as long as you see positive outcomes from that, then that's the way I invest. I don't really worry ever about dilution. If I own 20% of a company, I probably would. But that's not going to happen. So I think the issue is why companies don't, and maybe Tim and so it's normally down to cost, why they don't have an open offer on the same terms when they do actually have a place.
Well, thanks for all that, and Martin's still going to be with us, so if you want to tackle him outside, and I'm sure we can bring him into the discussion again later. But let's move on now to the companies themselves as we sort of dive into the whole commercial life science world with Neil Clark, who's the chief at Destiny Pharma, and this is a clinical stage company on AIM, as all our companies are. They had their IPO in 2017, focusing on something for which we've already heard tonight. There's a desperate need, innovative drugs addressing antibiotic resistance. Neil's chief executive, qualified as an accountant with PwC in Cambridge, but unlike most of that breed, he also has a BSc in bioscience, an impressive track record bringing biotech drug businesses to market. So over to you.
Thank you. Here to talk about Destiny. So I think we've got sort of 15, 18 minutes. So I will move through the slides. And as was introduced, Destiny is focused on developing new anti-infectives. We try not to use the word antibiotics because it comes with certain baggage, which we'll refer to later in the presentation. But every time I come to London and get off at Paddington, I've walked past the plaque for Alexander Fleming, the inventor of penicillin, of course, in 1940s. But straight away when penicillin was used, resistance was seen. And as was noted, the problem with drugs in this area, new drugs, is that are desperately needed is they do need to address the problem of the superbugs and resistance. And we do. Destiny has been set up to address that. So moving on, we listed in 2017. Our board, originally our chairman was Sir Nigel Rudd, but recently Nick Rogers has joined us, who was chairman of Oxford Biomedica and a healthcare banker. Myself and others have got experience in private and public companies. And I'd note that our founder, Dr. Bill Love, founded the company 20 years ago, ex-Novartis scientist, has spent a couple of decades working in this space, developing new anti-infectives, and was the inventor of the XF platform, which is our invention. So it's not an old formulation that we're revisiting. It's not in license from pharma. This is an invention down in Sussex from Bill and the team. So our sort of strap line, prevention is better than cure, which I think people can understand is of great benefit to patients and payers alike, trying to avoid, with our lead asset, costly hospital infections. And this is a well-established path for many drugs, but of course in the area of infection prevention makes great sense. And we have a lead asset which is looking to prevent hospital infections. And in the UK, we're well aware of MRSA, which perhaps a decade ago was really quite a hot political issue, with hospital wards being shut down due to this infection, which is methicillin-resistant Staphylococcal aureus. So Staph aureus is one of the sort of the top 12 nasty bugs which are listed on the WHO website. So we're looking to address infections caused by Staph aureus in hospitals. Next of 73, our lead asset is in phase 2, so we're recruiting patients now, and we're looking for that study to complete and then hopefully go into phase 3s. So we own the XF platform. Has big potential, driven by its use, we believe, in the increasing number of hospital procedures. associated with many of the indications, perhaps we talked about earlier, oncology and other diseases. There's often a hospital procedure, and many of these procedures expose the patient, which could be any of us, of course, to the potential for an infection. So obviously, if you can prevent those infections, you can potentially help a large number of patients, which with sensible pricing can lead, of course, to a very big market opportunity. We also have an earlier pipeline. We have a China partner, and also we have a good cash position. So we are small, but following the IPO and also a partnering deal we did in China with China Medical Systems, we have cash through to late 2020, even probably early 2021. And we're looking to deliver our data from our phase 2 asset and still have a cash runway to establish the next steps. So I think the message is clinical data coming and a good cash position, if you want the short summary. So here we have, I'm told, we have some MRSA in somebody's nose. So this is the sort of the Staph aureus tends to be always a sort of a football or a tennis ball type structure. So here you sit it inside the nose, and a third of the world is a carrier of Staph aureus in the nose. So a third of this room is a carrier in the nose of Staph aureus. You have it all over us, armpits, groins, but the nose is a key component in terms of where it can jump in causing hospital infections. I'll point out that I stand here now with probably, depending where you read, 30 to 50 billion bugs in me. All of us are, of course, wearing, and inside us, of course, have bacteria. And when they cause infections, of course, that normal, stable situation can lead to some very serious consequences. But one of the problems with anti-infectives, antibiotics, is that it's seen, as Martin didn't refer to earlier, it's not seen by pharma as one of the hot sectors. Despite penicillin and other new mechanisms that were discovered sort of 60s, even into the 70s, there hasn't really been a new novel mechanism for an antibiotic, anti-infective, so depending who you talk to, 30, 40 years. Also, they are, of course, the older mechanisms are cheap, generic, so pharma companies are reluctant to go into a space where they see low pricing and perhaps lack of novelty, and they have gradually moved out of this space. Now, this goes against the constant news of the challenge, the global problem of antimicrobial resistance, where I was at Cambridge on Friday with Dame Sally Davis, yet again talking about these Armageddon that will face us in 20, 30 years due to the rise of AMR. You have more chance of dying of the infection rather than perhaps your cancer or other disease because of the problem with the increasing lack of effectiveness of existing antibiotics. So this AMR challenge is important, and novel drugs that come into this space need to address it, and we do. We have clear differentiation with our XF platform that it doesn't lead to the same levels of resistance. It's very difficult for us to say you will never see resistance because these are superbugs for a reason. They are incredibly adaptable. Other challenges that anti-infectives face, including some of the companies that have brought forward sort of reformulations and revisited old formulations, is use in the community, where again you can have abuse and you have more widespread use, which can lead to resistance. Our products, especially our lead asset, are focused very much on the hospital use, where especially in the USA, you are then part of the hospital reimbursement bundle. And there are other advantages as well in terms of our approach. Is we believe low cost, we have a good route of manufacture. So we're not looking to be a high-priced, multi-thousand-dollar product. We believe we can compete very effectively against what are the few current drugs used in this space with our lead asset. And as I said, what we're looking to do here is reduce the problems caused by people who are carriers in the nose of Staph aureus. So I said a third of us carry staph in the nose, and you have a much greater chance then of having a post-surgical infection. This is a well-established fact. Across the world, it is best practice going into a hospital procedure to be screened, tested, and a nasal swab is taken, put in a PCR machine. You're either a carrier or you're clear. If you're a carrier, you should then have a treatment to decolonize, which ranges from perhaps an antiseptic wipe, which is a limited efficacy. There is one drug that was approved from GSK many years ago called mupirocin, which is a classical dermal antibiotic with resistance problems. And there are no new drugs in development, and there is nothing approved in the USA. So we have the potential to be the first approved drug in this space in the States. And driven again by the number of patient operations, you can see it builds up to, we believe, a significant market opportunity. I don't want to dwell too much on grisly photos, but you can see here the problems that can happen with serious infections. This is rare, but again, if you are a carrier in the nose, you have a 10 times greater chance of a post-surgical infection. And of course, the problems that can cause for patient recovery, costs, etc., can range from extra few days and more drugs, as opposed to some very, very serious infections, and of course, potentially, in the very worst cases, life-threatening. So our lead drug, XF73, addresses a clear market need. There is no approved drug in the USA, although it is recommended, as we're finding out now with our clinical study in US hospitals. We're actually talking to hospitals across the USA, and we're finding out exactly what's going on in those hospitals, which is on top of our previous market research. And doctors are looking to decolonize. They screen to see if a patient is a carrier, and they are looking to decolonize, but they don't really have an effective treatment. This has been acknowledged by the FDA, who have given our XF73 drug QIDP status, which means a couple of years ago they reviewed the existing data, and qualifying the infectious disease product status means that it gets extra 5 years market exclusivity, and we have fast track status. So again, we think we have a validation there from the FDA, and we're very confident we have a clear medical need for what we're looking to do with our lead asset. And indeed, the existing drug which is used, mupirocin, again, an old GSK antibiotic, which has done very well, but perhaps we believe seen its time. It has problems with resistance. You have to give it for 5 days before hospital treatments, whereas ours is 1 day. We see some clear advantages for our XF73 nasal gel compared to mupirocin, which again, mupirocin is not approved in the USA. It is approved in Europe and used in Europe and Japan and other countries. So we can go head to head with mupirocin. One of the key features of our drug is its lack of resistance compared to classical antibiotics. Is the red button the light? Is that the light? Okay. Well, anyway, what's happening here, this is a selection of Petri dishes where you start day one with your Staph aureus in this case, or in this case MRSA is growing there. You apply your antibiotic, or in this case as well our drug, XF73, and of course in all cases you're killing the vast majority of the bacteria. You never kill all of them. The ones that aren't killed are potentially becoming resistant. So you take those, you grow them up again, and then you try and kill them again, and you measure the quantity of drug needed to kill them. And what happens over time, after 3 or 4 exposures, all of the older antibiotics begin to fail. So you go north on the chart, and you have to give increasing volumes of our antibiotic to achieve an effective kill rate. What you see here after 55 exposures along the bottom, the blue dots there are XF73. And this is a class attribute whereby over multiple exposures to XF73, you don't see resistance. So we would never make the claim you will never see resistance, but it clearly differentiates us from other antibiotics. And we've done this with a number of the compounds in our portfolio, and also tested in similar models against a variety of antibiotics, and we always beat them, and we believe this is the longest ever published passage data. So a key component of the uniqueness of the XF73 approach, and as I said at the start, we believe this is key to any new anti-infective. You have to address antimicrobial resistance. This is clinical data, which is really was the data which was reported in 2016, which was the trigger for the IPO. So this data, this was a study that was paid for and carried out by the US government, their infectious disease division. Effectively, the left 3 handbars are placebo. So this is people who are carriers in the nose. They're given a gel. This is the inert gel, and then they're measured over time, the number of bacteria. And on the right, you see the same gel with our active XF73. And the black horizontal line basically is the hospital measure. Above the line, you're a carrier. Below the line, you're clear. And what you can see is, compared to placebo, you have a very marked effect. Bear in mind, these are log scales, Martin, that you have a very marked effect of reduction of the number of bacteria in the nose using XF73 compared to placebo. You always have a placebo effect, because if we pick or blow our noses, we lose bacteria. We're looking to repeat this now in the phase 2, which is underway. So if we replicate that data in a phase 2 study, the only difference being this is volunteers who are carriers in the nose. Our clinical study is people who are carriers in the nose who are going in for operations. So we will look forward to that study reporting. This is, I think it's over 250 data points from subjects. Bear in mind these are volunteers, albeit all of our volunteers have always been nasal carriers. So we've obviously shown that the drug is very safe. It's classed as a non-irritant. And of course we've established the dose and refined the gel. So we have a very well developed formulation. And you'll see here at the bottom, we're looking to, the final product will be a very easy sort of break-off plastic nozzle, which should squirt in your nose, and that's the dose, which is better than the current alternatives of wipes or tubes with inexact dosing. The phase 2 is ongoing. Obviously, post-phase 2, we can have discussions with the FDA under our QIDP regarding phase 3s, and potentially we can be looking for US registrations in 22-23. As always, with timelines in drug development, take care. We have to be very careful putting them up there. There are often delays, drug development review processes, but these are reasonable estimates. And obviously, we'll be pushing ahead and doing our best to meet those timelines. But the key thing, of course, in the next 6 months is delivering the phase 2 data. And this is a slide which summarises the study. As ever, drug development, incredibly complicated, and also manufacturing and formulation is complicated. This business is very difficult. It is harder than rocket science. And just coming back to the XF platform, we do have a pipeline. Our first 2 assets are clinical. We've talked about the nasal program in phase 2. We have a phase 1 asset we're looking to build up to phase 2 in 2020, which is targeting infections in leg ulcers, diabetic foot ulcers. Again, this is using the same compound in a different formulation. This is a large market. And then we have earlier assets in discovery phase. We're looking at ocular, respiratory, and small dermal applications, especially in biofilms. And biofilms are where bacteria hide away in a sort of polysaccharide layers. Very common in dentistry, so a lot of dental infections of a biofilm component is involved there. And you also see that we have, and this is important in this space, where pharma are perhaps not investing as much as they should be in anti-infectives, but you get a lot of support from governments. US will put multi-million investments into company programs. You'll see Summit Therapeutics has a $60 million funding from BARDA. We have partnerships which are funded by the NBIC in the UK and also Innovate, but also with our China connection, and we have a partner for our portfolio, China Medical Systems in Shenzhen. We also have a partnership with Tianjin University, where we've won a grant, which is, I think, circa about, depending on currencies, about $1.5 million to fund work. So obviously that's going into the discovery space, not clinical development, but I think it does show we have a pipeline, albeit the value inflection for the short term is very much around our phase 2 asset. Dermal infections, diabetic foot ulcers, leg ulcers are an important area. Unfortunately, again, people who are not necessarily, it's not linked to nasal carriage at all. This is linked to nasal carriage. It's just linked to the fact that these infections, these wounds, can get infected very easily by first colonizers again, such as Staph aureus. We have a package there which we're working on, and we're hoping to bring that forward through to phase 2 in sort of 2020, 2021. And our research projects I've discussed. China Medical Systems shows that we can do deals, so we did that around the IPO, and as we deliver data from the phase 2, we'll be looking to sign more partnerships, hopefully in the US and other territories. Our strategy is to seek partnerships. We are not looking to build a sales and marketing force, so again, we have to build packages that can be passed on to pharma. In our case, it's more likely to be specialty pharma rather than the big pharma guys, because there's really only Merck, perhaps GSK and Roche who play in this space. But even then, they're probably, perhaps most of them, bringing to look at vaccines rather than actually classical small molecule anti-infectives. So, prevention is better than cure. We have some exciting clinical data coming, within a year, hopefully within 6 months. We're funded to deliver that, and we have an earlier pipeline. And I believe our lead asset really has a clear clinical need. The more we are out there carrying out the study, talking to hospitals, we know that doctors want this drug. So our challenge is to convert that medical need into a clear commercial opportunity, but we're confident we can do that because we can make this relatively cheaply, and we believe it will be an exciting year for us next year as we deliver that data. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil Clark. Okay, so questions for Neil Clark? Yes, one over the front here.
Thanks, Neil. I'm just wondering if you take one of your products or the ones that have come before for this decolonisation, if you have this bacteria on you, is that in advance of every single medical procedure that person has, or can you effectively have one application of it then be cured of what might make you vulnerable in the first place?
What you're looking to do with the nose is, I'm going in for my cardiac operation tomorrow. The day before today, I would have 1 dose in the morning, 1 in the evening. Same again for the day of surgery, and maybe one the day after. So I'm looking to decolonise my nose for the period of risk. And the period of risk basically is when I'm cut open. because the bacteria is opportunistic and will jump. At the same time, you would have armpit washes with chlorhexidine and be washed. But what will happen after that, hopefully you recover and you will recolonise, because your normal state is to be a carrier of staph in the nose. So if I was to unfortunately have another operation in 6 months' time, probably go through exactly the same procedure. So there are markets actually for regular weekly decolonisations, where perhaps if you're a known carrier, people might every week, once a week, try and reduce the carriage in their nose. But we're targeting very much people who are going in for serious operations. So these are the more invasive procedures: cardiac, orthopaedic, caesareans, knees, hips, knees, that type of surgery.
There's one at the back there and one at the front here.
Who do you want to go for first?
Front first and then the back. Here we are. Blue shirt.
Thank you. Very interesting presentation. I'm new to your company, but I was just checking the IPO price, 157 versus current share price. Could you just tell us what happened during that journey and why is the share price so low?
Yeah, we had the company's 20 years old, so there were some private shareholders who sold out in the early days, which the market was bad, but we just drifted down. And then last 2-3 weeks ago, we had Garraway basically dump their stake, and they picked that up from City Financial, which went into administration. So that was not a managed sale. They just sold it to Winterflood. So that was unfortunate for us, but we'll move on from that. But it's I mean, if you look at the way we've tracked the general market, I'm afraid I think we've followed down a lot of AIM stocks and the anti-infective grouping as well. So yes, it's been a tough time in terms of share price.
And you said you have cash till 2020, early 21. Providing that you will get through the phase 2, how much more cash do you need for phase 3?
Well, it depends if we do the study or a partner does it. But the phase 3 potentially could be into sort of the 20 to 30 million bracket, whereas the current phase 2 in terms of total funding is probably nearer sort of just getting towards 10. So yes, definitely you move up in terms of some bigger numbers, albeit it doesn't get close to sort of the 2 billion that was talked about earlier.
So what is, I know it sounds perhaps a naive question, but what is the breakthrough point when you would either decide to refund or sort of sell where you are on to another company? Because obviously AIM investors are always impatient. They want that moment when everything's coming right.
The inflection point obviously will be phase 2 data. Having said that, of course, as people aren't silly in terms of, as Martin said, looking for when refinances might happen, then people may wait then for us to refinance to then look at in terms of the smaller investor coming in. But obviously it's a cash-consuming business, so it's difficult. And I think, I mean, talking generally, it's difficult to find examples in the UK biotech market where people break out. The normal end game is you get taken out, you get acquired, because there isn't in London AIM at the moment, there isn't the appetite for investing in drug development companies.
And very quickly, because we've got another question here, why the focus on the FDA and the US? Well, is that always the way that you go for the US?
Well, it's the biggest market,
first?
but also for the lead indication, as I said, the sort of the comparator drug, mepiricin, is not approved in the USA, so there's no approved drug. So this is much easier then. Your clinical trials are against placebo, but also if you do get approved, you are the gold standard. Now, we will come back to Europe because mepiricin is approved, but it's much easier when there is no approved drug to take your...
I'm not even going to ask you about the UK if we're in or out of Brexit, but there's a question in the middle here. Didn't we have a question? Somebody here? Yes, there we are.
I just want to follow up both these gentlemen's questions, actually. So, yeah, certainly, I recognise the market size is bigger in the US. Why are you doing your phase 1 and phase 2 studies in the US rather than here in Europe? And also to follow up this gentleman's question, as he said, you're looking at the prophylaxis indication for pre-surgery, whereas this is far less profitable than a treatment indication for infection of some sort. Is there something in the tox data or otherwise that has led you to concentrate on that indication?
Well, secondly, no, there's nothing wrong with the tox data, and there's no difference in the profits between a prophylactic approach driven by tens of millions in operations or a chronic use.
I would have thought there is.
There's money to be made in both markets.
I agree, but the pre-surgery is certainly a smaller indication, a smaller market size than is antibiotic continuous daily doses to treat.
I disagree, and we've got the analysis. And then your other point, I can't remember, sorry, what was your other point regarding...
why you're performing your phase 1, your phase 2
Well, we're doing a phase 2, and it's in USA and Europe. And the phase 1s have been in Europe and USA, and the reason we're focusing on the US, as I said, is because there's no approved drug there. So it's, and we have the QID support from the FDA, so it's pushing against an open door. Europe is a fragmented market. It's a very poor place to do clinical studies generally, so we're quite happy to be focused on the US.
Europe's? Oh, okay. Thank you.
Just bring in Dr. Martin Hall. Any sort of thoughts about what we've been hearing?
Well, I'm converted in that I agree that I agree with Neil, there's very little interest from big pharma in antibiotics, but I'm aware of another company up in Cambridge with an interesting new technology, and it has struggled for 10, 12 years to get any form of funding to do a clinical trial. So Neil's in a much stronger position in that he's on the market, he's got the funding through to a critical point. If those data are positive, I would expect his telephone to be ringing quite a lot.
And we have a China partner, so we have China Medical Systems, over 3,000 sales reps in China. Dr. Wai Jingpen is their international director and ex-fund manager in the city, healthcare, you will know Wai Jing. So we have a built-in connection, also different places to go potentially for funding in terms of a corporate investor. So, and also that validation, somebody who's looked at all of our data and market sizes. So it's tough out there in terms of share price, but we're quite confident where we are. I've been doing this for over 20 years, and we're fortunate we have very clear assets, little competition, and we're funded to deliver some key data. We're in a biotech, and that's Christmas, to be honest. So we'll plough on and look forward to further success.
Any more questions for Destiny? Okay, well, I've stunned everybody into silence. Thank you very much indeed. Well, next up, a specialty pharmaceutical company focused on developing, commercializing late-stage hospital-focused pharmaceuticals, according to their website, addressing areas of unmet medical need. Tim Watts has 25 years' experience in the pharmaceutical and biotech sectors, qualified chartered accountant, again, initially with ICI and Zeneca, financial controller at AstraZeneca, and then with other companies, Archimedes Pharma and Oxford Biomedica, and has advised numerous startups.
Sorry to say that if I survive into January, I've actually done 30 years in the industry.
30 years, okay.
But anyway, now I'm with Shield and have been the CFO there for just over the last year. So Shield is AIM listed. It's got a market cap now of about £220 million, and the primary focus is on commercializing a product for the treatment of iron deficiency, which is called Ferrocru in Europe, Acrifer in the US, where we've only recently been approved. It's a novel oral treatment for iron deficiency. We've had 3 successful phase 3 clinical studies, 2 of which formed the basis of the US approval, one of which was a head-to-head study against one of the industry-leading products. We've out-licensed the product Ferrocru in Europe to Norgine, who are a privately held, mid-sized company with a very strong sales and marketing presence. As I said, we've only very recently got the approval for Acrifer, as the drug is known in the US, in July, and we're looking now to appoint a sales and marketing partner in the US. We do have in our portfolio a late-stage asset, a phosphate binder. That requires 1 more phase 3 study. I don't think there's really anything included in our valuation today for that product. We're semi-virtual in as much as there's only 20 or so of us working in the company at the moment, although we like to think we're pretty experienced. And we have a cash runway that goes to the 3rd quarter of 2020, although if and when we are successful in appointing a partner for the US, we would expect quite a sizable upfront payment for that license, which would be the industry norm. And so this cash flow forecast here does not include any upfront. This, I guess, is what the investment thesis is. We would argue, I'm not the CEO, I'm the CFO, but I too would argue that the company is undervalued. Current market cap, as I say, is around 220 million. The 4 analysts who cover us, Edison, Peel Hunt, Hardman and FinCap, variety of forecasts there. But I've taken the liberty of picking some quotes out of the recent reports. They've all put out notes basically on the back of our interim results in early August. And certainly the first 3 all say significant upside potential, and we will look at this again when the company has got a partner in the US. FinCap have taken a slightly more bullish stance from the outset. There is a slight correction I need to make here. The Feb 16 IPO price, £1.50 was the IPO price, which is why it slipped onto that line, but there was about 116 million shares, so actually the valuation at IPO was more like 175 million, so it should be a little bit further up. So a little bit about iron deficiency and where Ferrocru Acrifa fits into that. Iron deficiency is required for multiple functions in the body. It's a key component of hemoglobin, which carries the oxygen around the body, but it has many other aspects, many other functions as well. Iron deficiency fundamentally occurs either if your body doesn't absorb enough iron from your diet, or you lose iron through blood loss. And that can be exacerbated in a number of chronic diseases, in particular inflammatory bowel disease, chronic kidney disease, women's health issues, and CHF. But there are many others as well. It's the most common form of anemia, and that's called iron deficiency anemia, or you'll see it referred to as IDA. And the treatment of iron deficiency with or without anemia is with either oral or intravenous iron replacement therapy. Typically what will happen is if you're suffering from iron deficiency anemia, typically, very few people with just the iron deficiency will be treated. But if you're suffering from anemia, your first-line treatment is almost certainly going to be with a cheap, generic, salt-based product. These are inexpensive and convenient, but they are very poorly absorbed, and therefore they restore iron levels slowly. And because these are iron salts, and because the iron and the salt break out to free up the iron for absorption, the iron can aggregate in the gut and create a variety of unpleasant side effects. And therefore, they're not well tolerated. So for patients for whom there's a really pressing need to treat the anemia or other aspect of the iron deficiency, the only other course of treatment is through intravenous, which is where you essentially have a very substantial dose of iron injected into your bloodstream. That actually can cause anaphylactic shock, so you have to have it done in a clinic or a hospital environment, so it's inconvenient. The drug price component of that is expensive, and of course the hospital cost, whoever has to pay those, is an expense as well. So essentially iron therapy is poorly served. Our product is a novel oral formulation. It is not a salt. Essentially, it is a chelated product. Is there a pointer here, the red dot? Yeah, there. So you've got the Fe3 plus iron surrounded by 3 maltol molecules, and that forms a very strong chelate. And essentially, unlike a salt, it does not break down in the body until it reaches the part of your body where the absorption of iron takes place. That process in the body is stronger than the chelation, and it will pull out of the body will pull out of the chelate as much iron as it needs. Because essentially the molecules around these are maltol molecules around here. Maltol is a product, essentially a sugar type substance used quite a lot in the food industry. So it's harmless, and so this chelate, if it's not absorbed, if the body doesn't absorb all of it, the chelate will just pass straight through the body and has no side effects. And to the extent that the iron is taken into the body, the maltol molecules are separated out, and they too will pass through the body in the normal way. So essentially you've got a product here where when it reaches the part of the body which, if you are short of iron, if you are iron deficient, the body will demand the iron. It will take the iron from this product and not cause the side effects that you see with the iron salts. Where do we position this product in the treatment process? Really, as I said a few minutes ago, essentially patients who are diagnosed with iron deficiency will first of all be treated with oral iron. Some of these patients will be tolerant of the oral salts, and because these are generic products, they're cheap, that's probably an adequate way of treating those patients if they can handle them. But the statistics will vary from indication to indication, but in some indications up to 70% of patients find they cannot tolerate the salts. So they then come down this path. And as I said a little bit earlier, at the moment, or up until now, the only treatment for them is to come down this intravenous route, which has its cost, it has its unpleasant It's inconvenient, and also having a lot of iron injected into your bloodstream is not particularly pleasant. In fact, I saw an article from Australia just today which said that it was asking all GPs in Australia to get patient consent before doing intravenous iron therapy, because the actual injection area is now causing brown stains which don't come out around where the intravenous takes place. So it is not particularly pleasant. So if you have to, a patient will come down this route. But if you can't at the moment, patients simply will say, well, I'll tolerate the side effect, tolerate the effects of the iron deficiency, and I won't have any treatment. And what we're saying is, well, now you don't have to be in that position. You can come down the Ferrocru Acrifa route because it's oral, it's easy to take, and it doesn't have the side effects. I'll also say, because I'm not going to say it's not on any of the other slides, we have patent protection on this product out to 2035, so we've got a long 15-year life, which is quite unusual for a product just coming to the market. In terms of the market size, the volume and value, the top half of the slide essentially repeats information I've just said, but because oral is prescribed first, the actual volume and number of prescriptions is far greater for oral than it is for intravenous. It represents probably about 90% of the market by prescription, whereas our IV is only about 10%. But what you see by value is that the intravenous size is at least 50% of the market. This slide actually was one that we did some time ago. This is 23 to 2016. In a minute, you'll see on a slide. Here it suggests that the intravenous value is about $1 billion. We've got evidence in a minute which suggests it's approaching $2 billion now. So this is a big market. And where is my evidence for saying that? This is a chart that we actually took from Vifor, as you can see down here. Vifor are a Swiss company, and they own Ferinject, which is the leading intravenous product. This comes out of a presentation they gave when their last annual results, and they're basically saying that 898 million Swiss francs, so broadly equivalent to US dollars, are their sales of their intravenous product, Ferinject. And they're saying here that they reckon they've got 49% of the market. So $900 million, double it, you've got a market there of $1.8 billion, which we would say can now be directly targeted by our product, Ferrocru and Acrifa. And I mentioned a little bit earlier that we had a clinical study which went head-to-head, so H2H, against Ferinject. What that study showed when it reported in March of this year was that Ferrocru was non-inferior to Ferinject in treating iron deficiency anemia. So that means we can say to physicians, you don't have to give your patients intravenous iron. You can treat them with this oral product instead. And this is another slide from V4, where essentially, that doesn't look like it's, no, the pink lines I'm afraid aren't showing up. These are recent growth rates in these countries. So you can see that the intravenous market and the Ferinject sales in particular are growing rapidly in these countries. So this is a high growth and a high value market that we can get into. Recent clinical development activities. I said that we had 3 clinical studies. I'm not going to sort of go through each of those and the results because they've been out for some time. This is a slide actually we showed at our interims presentation. So the head-to-head study reported in March of 2019, and as I said a minute ago, that essentially showed that the response rate from Ferrocru was non-inferior, which is a sort of technical industry term, when compared with Ferinject, which is the market-leading intravenous product. We would love to be able to show you a little bit more information on this, and we will do in due course, but until the data is presented in a peer-reviewed form in an abstract at a clinical congress, which it's going to be in October, we are not in a position to give much more detail on this because essentially the industry and the science and the medics will say, look, if you've already published your data, then we're not interested in publishing it in a scientific congress. So We haven't published the full data of this yet, but the full clinical study report, which is a confidential document, is being used by our partners Norgine to develop the whole pricing and reimbursement argument for the European market, and essentially to say this product is as good as the intravenous and therefore we should be pricing the product equivalently. We have a pediatric program which is required both under the terms of our approval from both the European authorities, the EMA, and the US FDA. I won't dwell on that for now. And some publications, as I mentioned, the head-to-head study publication is coming out next month. We had some interesting other less important publications, but still helpful. So what has been going on in Europe in terms of the commercialization of the product? We licensed the product last year to Norgine. I think you've all got copies of the presentation, so I won't go through the terms of the license deal. But how are things getting on? Clearly, there was a handover period that we had to go through first, which really meant that Norgine really got going and launched the product at the start of this year. You need to bear in mind in Europe that there are two markets essentially where you can go in and set your price, and that's the UK and Germany. The rest of the continent, particularly the other big markets, France, Spain, Italy, they require you to go and negotiate with them for a price and that price to be reimbursed. We have not wanted to do that until we had the definitive evidence from the head-to-head study, because it's that head-to-head study which gives us the justification for seeking a high price. So the product has been launched in Germany and the UK, where, as I said, we can set the price. And again, there's some subtleties. In Germany, you can get going pretty much straight away. But in England, you have to go on a case-by-case basis around all the care commissioning groups that there are. So there's about 200 of those. And Scotland and Wales and Northern Ireland all have their own bodies, and as yet, none of them have yet approved. So it's a painful process in the UK where you have to sort of chip away and get the drug going. So we don't expect, and Norgine don't expect, a rocket-like takeoff of Ferrocru. What you can see, though, is this is a chart which shows the UK and German pack sales. We showed this in our half-year results. Shield had actually launched the product back in the fourth quarter of 2016, but was very cash constrained. But there was some steady growth in the packs. For a variety of reasons, Shield then ran out of cash and had to withdraw all cash resources. But very encouragingly, the product did not collapse at that time. It kept growing, albeit on a much slower basis. And then when Norgine started to get going in the first half of this year, the sales have started to rise quite quickly. We deliberately haven't put we don't want to actually show Norgine's confidential information about how many packs they're selling. But that is obviously an encouraging takeoff. But as I say, we have to bear in mind that so far it is only in the UK and Germany. And in fact, it's only in England and Germany. France, Italy, Spain, and other countries in Europe, the pricing and reimbursement packages will go in based on the head-to-head study data, and that work is going on at the moment. But these countries all take time, and it is likely that it'll be into the first quarter of 2021 before we can get the product going in all of the countries in Europe. In terms of the US, we got the approval a couple of months ago for iron deficiency in adults. That's a great result because it's a very broad, it's not just iron deficiency anemia, it's the whole iron deficiency. There are some post-approval commitments, but we're building those into the existing pediatric study that has already been planned for the European authorities. And this is a major market opportunity. If you just look at iron deficiency anemia in the States, not the broader iron deficiency, we reckon there's something like 8 to 9 million. In fact, I think I've got a slide in a minute which shows about 9.5 million US patients. Inevitably, however you measure these things, you can look at it in different ways, so you get slightly different numbers. But it's of that order of magnitude who have iron deficiency anemia. The current US market, we reckon, is worth about $1 billion. So that was going back to that V4 slide of nearly 2 billion. And we think there's potentially 2 to 3 times more patients who have iron deficiency without the anemia. And in many ways, you can say if you get to the iron deficiency anemia stage, you're actually a failure that's a treatment failure for people with iron deficiency. Why let it go on and on and on until you get to the anemic stage? So we're going to be positioning as a non-inferior oral alternative to intravenous iron, but in due course, we would see if the success that we would expect to have with Acrifer, it will then sort of start to be used in the broader replacement for the existing oral iron salts. And we anticipate that the pricing, if you were to take Acrifer for a year, and it's twice daily, you take it, it's a capsule you take twice daily. If you were to take it to about a year, we want to price that, and we think our US partner will probably want to price that around the cost of a single dose of intravenous iron. So a pricing argument will say, if you take this for a year, you solve the iron deficiency problem. If you take intravenous iron, you need typically to come back every 3 to 4 months because you just dump a load of iron into somebody's veins, and if they've got a problem, they can't absorb or they're bleeding, then over time that iron will come out of the body again. So you need to top it up. So we think there's a significant price and health economics argument. This is the chart which shows the 9 or so million patients with iron deficiency anemia in the US, and by the types of disease that they would be suffering. In terms of the process, we're not going to say any more than we said at when we put out our interims at the beginning of August. We are running a process to select a partner at the moment, and we envisage that we can complete that process by the end of this year, although we're not guaranteeing, we're not going to do that at any price. We want to get the best deal rather than say we'll have to do a deal by the end of the year, but we think we can get it done by the end of the year. We do, as I say, have a backup product, PT20. I think in the interest of, I'm probably running a bit short of time, so I'll just skip over this for now. Financial headlines, we had revenues of 2.6 million for the first half of the year. 2.2 of that was a milestone that we got from Norgine, which was written into the agreement. On the back of a successful head-to-head study, they would give us a 2.5 million euro, 2.2 million pounds milestone. The royalties and that we get from them at the moment is still small beer in comparison. Our losses have come right down because we've had to restructure the organisation a year ago. We had 6.6 million of cash at the end of June, and in fact I'll move on to the next slide. The cash runway, as I think I said earlier on, extends into the third quarter of next year. So on the assumption that we can get a deal done this year or early next year at most, then I don't believe that we have a cash issue because we have plenty of cash to get us through to the middle of next year. In terms of news flow, the potential out-licensing agreement in the US. We're also working in the same time on an out-licensing arrangement in China. Again, we're going through a similar process. We have a short list of candidates. We're going to start the pediatric study sometime in the first half of next year, and there will be a further update of European sales. But the key issues are clearly going to be the US first, and then the second, the China deals. So, as a summary, we've seen encouraging sales growth from Norgine's first 6 months, but only in Germany and England. Great news that Acrifer was approved in the US. The out-licensing processes are well underway. We've got a fantastically broad label, which really means there's a huge market for Ferrocru or Acrifer to go for.
Fantastic. Thank you very much indeed. So, questions for Tim. Let me ask you one while they're thinking about that. In terms of your potential earnings, how price sensitive is this? Because obviously you've talked about the complexities of setting the price. If you were to set it a lot lower or a lot higher, what are the advantages, disadvantages of that?
The problem in the pharmaceutical industry generally is that once you've set a price, you can never increase it. Now that's not quite true in the US, but even the US is getting tougher, and there's a lot of pricing scandals, as you're probably aware. So it's not advisable to shoot low for a price, really, because you can always reduce the price at some later stage if that's what you want to do. Also, for our product, although we see that this could be a product which in time could be used in the GP fraternity, primary care fraternity, because our clinical studies where the evidence lies has mainly been in inflammatory bowel disease and in chronic kidney disease, we would expect that, and this is what Norgine are doing, and we would certainly expect in the US, that any partner we choose will seek to go and use that data with those specialists who treat those first to really establish the credibility. And for them, what we can say is, look, if you treat your patients with Acrifer, it is going to be cheaper than treating them with the intravenous therapy. And that will be the argument. So pushing the price down much lower at that early stage is just going to lose revenue. Once we've got acceptance in the specialist community, and then hopefully that broadens out into cardiology and women's health, then one would expect that the sort of noise will start to generate momentum in the wider primary care community. And of course, in the US, you're allowed to do direct-to-consumer advertising as well, which you can imagine this would be quite a nice sort of DTC type of campaign that you could run, but not immediately. But in those later years, when you're going out into the broader community, maybe at that stage you might want to bring the price down to get the volumes.
Okay. Right, there's one.
I've got it, I'll be quick.
Yep, okay.
Congrats on hitting the NI margin, which I think was 20%. Are you able to say what the delta...
Sorry, the which margin?
Your non-inferiority margin.
Oh, right, yes.
Are you able to tell us what the delta was?
I won't, and I'm not sure. Firstly, I'm not sure that I'm technically qualified to answer that question. Secondly, it's going to wait, I think, until the publication in the middle of October.
Okay, and at the front here.
Thank you for the presentation. You mentioned that the size of the global market is $2 billion. Is it global, or is it just US and Europe, that number?
So first of all, that 2 billion I showed you, I think was old date. It was a 2013 to 2016 chart. V4 are saying that it's 1.8 billion, and I think that was for them that was an attempt at global. But of course, once you get outside the US, Europe, and Japan, the markets become much, much smaller. Now, China, I think, will become very big, but it's not there yet.
Do you mean Chinese are prone to iron deficiency more than?
Again, I'm not qualified to say whether they're any more or less prone to us, but we will need, our Chinese partner, whoever we select, will in fact need to do one more study, because the Chinese authorities require that you have studies with enough ethnically Chinese patients in the database before they approve it. And our studies, we don't have enough, so any partner will need to do that study. But I don't know whether they're more or less inclined to iron deficiency than we are. I suspect there's little difference. But,
And if your business plan progresses as you believe it may with the success in the US, and you're able to sell your product successfully in Europe, in the US, maybe China and Japan, what market share do you envisage your company to have, let's say, in 5 years' time, 3 to 5 years' time?
what market?
Market share. Let's say the market will be $3 billion in 5 years. Let's just put a number out.
I think it's entirely reasonable to think that this product could get 10% of the market. You could argue it could have significantly more than that. I mean, everything I've seen, and I'm not an expert, but everything I've seen suggests that this product has some very interesting advantages over both the existing oral and the existing intravenous. And therefore, if that's right, why wouldn't it take more than 10%? But I think it would be unwise to suggest that within 5 years it could grab more than 10% of that market. It's got to be absolutely spectacularly stellar to do better than that, I think. But then 10% of that sort of market is obviously quite a generous size.
Yeah, I was quite surprised with the slide you showed. The Swiss company went from 18 million to 900 in 10 years. What was the reason for their success? And could you be that company in 10 years' time, having $1 billion of sales?
Well, we won't have the sales because we're outsourcing the commercialization. So ours would be a royalty flow, because we will do a license deal, which typically would have an upfront payment when the license deal is done. It might or might not have sales milestones when you first hit 200 million or first hit 500 million or whatever it is. But a crucial part to it would be a royalty flow. So we won't be the company with that level of sales, but we won't have the cost base either. So why did V4 grow the intravenous? I think they came out with a better intravenous product than anybody else. And there is clearly a need. I mean, if you're suffering badly from inflammatory bowel disease and you're anemic and you can't take the oral salts, you need something.
Thank you.
Any more questions for Tim? Okay, thank you very much indeed. And finally, we move to Open Orphan, and I'm sure we'll find out exactly what an orphan is in this context. This hopes to become a European rare disease and orphan drug focus services company, and all masterminded by, I think, reasonable to say, a noted Donegal corporate financier. He organised a reverse takeover of the clinical trials group, Life Sciences, and well, we often talk about oil and gas on these evenings, and in fact, he was involved in the floating of Fastnet. Indeed, he did float Fastnet Oil and Gas, obviously a company maybe familiar to some of you, and the drug group Amrit Pharma. So, Cathal, Friel.
Okay. Nigel, thank you very much. Thank you for taking your time. I'm conscious, last speaker, we want to get some nice, this beautiful room of beer and get some alcohol, so I'll try and make it reasonably swift, 15, 20 minutes to allow some time for Q&A. But as Nigel said, look, this is very much an opportunist. This is not a lifetime role. This is not 5 years role. My wife tells me I have a attention span of a gnat. This is a year or two roll of the dice, this business. What we're trying to do with this business, and this again, like my background is corporate financer. First IPO I did was I was involved with Cove Energy, went through the roof, but unfortunately I was only a very bit player. Then we did Fastnet Oil and Gas. It worked. Oil price collapsed, and we reversed it and created Amrit Pharmaceutical. It's been much more successful. Amrit, you might watch in the market in the next coming weeks, as public, is going from 60 million market cap to 300 million. Share price not going up to absorb a very large American company with 150 million revenues. So that's de-risking Amrit, and I remain one of the larger shareholders in Amrit. I was thinking of selling the shares a year ago because they were waiting on a trial, but now they've de-risked it, they've acquired serious revenues. And that's what came an idea, and this is an idea, it's pure opportunist. And if anybody's thinking of investing in this particular company, what I'd suggest is that you've got to look at the three individuals behind it, and are they worth backing? And I'll take you to them, myself, my two colleagues. But really what we're trying to do is that, look, I'm not a pharma expert. I got lucky in Amrit, found two brilliant guys, Joe Wiley and Roy Nealon. They're the pharma people. They knew what they were doing. Let them get on with it. I keep saying, make us rich, guys. But what always frightened me with my stockbroking hat on pharmaceuticals, and we had a couple of them in Ireland, Eland, it was up, down, up, down. You pick the cycle, you can make lots of money. But if you picked your price wrong, it could double, triple, or it could half. But there was a bunch of pharmaceutical companies, the services companies, that grew at 25% compound. And in particular, my fellow founder, Brenton Buckley, a youthful 67-year-old, he's been involved the last 7 years in Icon. He sold a small company to Icon in 2013. Icon's market cap was 800 million. 6 years later, when he left to join us, it had gone 10x up. Icon never took a risk in his life. It runs clinical trials. It provides services to pharmaceutical companies, makes a shed load of money, and compound growth. And that's where we came up with this idea. We put together a pharmaceutical services company. Everything should be cost plus profitable. And being honest, it's opportunist, and we've tagged on, let's do orphan drugs. It's kind of sexy. There's nobody else specialized in orphan drugs. We're not exclusively orphan drugs. First of all, what's an orphan drug? 4 years ago, I was going, something to feed orphans, is it? Not sure. Didn't know, being honest with you. Now we'll talk about them. Orphan drugs is basically a name for diseases that are very rare. So the treatment that treats a rare disease is called an orphan because there's not a lot of them around. A bit like orphan children, there's not an awful lot around. So orphan drugs are drugs for diseases that are quite rare. However, they're not as rare as one might imagine. I'll come to that. Very quickly, look, if you're going to invest in the company, this is an opportunist play. Myself, I think I've talked enough. I've done 3 IPOs, one of them more successful than this is the third one. Background, corporate finance, stockbroking. Mainly was involved in selling companies for 15 years. Now this last 7 years trying to promote companies put together. Only difference I generally make compared to maybe some of the other small cap companies is that I generally, I end up with a decent stake. In Amrit, when we IPO'd, I was the second largest shareholder. I remain the third largest shareholder. Open Orphan, I become the biggest shareholder. And the only way you can do that is write a check. My wife kills me. I don't have many millions, might have only 1 or 2, but it usually all goes in. I put $1 million, almost $2 million now into Open Orphan to get it of the way. I did the same with Amrit. As that means if it goes wrong, I get hurt quite badly, equally as badly as you. So I just think, and at the IPO, the mistake I made in the Amrit IPO in the fast, that I had a lot of money, $1 million in them. But the fund manager say, hey, Cathal, smart boy, how much money have you in the IPO? I say, they're at our IPO price. So this one, I put 300,000 of my own cash in at 5.6p in IPO 8 weeks ago. So that means the fund managers, and we went to the fund managers in this one, said, oh, okay, you're in alongside us at the same price. So look, enough about me. The 2 people who really know what they're doing are my colleague Morris. Yeah, here we are. And what he's really bringing, he's Chief Commercial Officer. We're purely services cost plus, so we're not going to get 5x uplift. We're going to try and grow 25 or 30% compound growth, but we're going to sex it up, to use Tony Blair's comment. And how are we going to sex it up? We're bringing the digital platforms, and particularly this genomic database business. Morris, 4 years ago, put this company together. Unfortunately, he wasn't a real shareholder. He was a venture partner for a large life science fund. Established Genomic Medicine Ireland, GMI. Picked up very quickly 15% of the DNA of the Irish population. Not very hard. Ireland's, the entire population, people forget in Ireland, is less than Greater Manchester. Irish people make a lot of noise and claim to be much bigger than that. When you think of it, this little noisy island over on the west coast is smaller population based in Greater Manchester. So however, Morris put that together with some colleagues, did a funding round in year 3 for 400 million and sold it to the Wuxi Next Code. So you can imagine, now unfortunately, Morris made that money. He was acting for a biotech venture fund, but it was fabulously successful. So Morris is coming in, he's bringing the DNA database business, he's sexing up our services businesses. And Brendan, youthful 67-year-old, done a couple of exits, sold his last company to Icon, and he said he made more money on the rising share price in Icon, the 10x that he did from selling his company in day one, where he worked for 7 years. 30 years in clinical trials, claim to fame. He wrote a book, How to Speed Up Clinical Trials and Fix Them. And his real one, he's very involved with the European Medicines Agency, and a colleague here in Oxford, they co-authored the European Orphan Drug Protocols. So he knows his way around the orphan drug space. Moving swiftly on, pharma consulting. Why are we chasing the consulting space? Why are we not developing drugs? The pharma consulting business, it's high margins, but it's highly fragmented. There's about 10, 15 monsters, Icon being one of them, 8 billion market cap, hundreds, even thousands of small players. It's rapid growth, compound 8.8% growth. The pharma consulting space in America though is 8.9. And then why are we talking about orphan drugs? The reason it's interesting, 20 years ago there was no orphan drugs. Pharma companies were after the asthma, the heart disease, the cancer. And then they've slowed off and there was no cures for these rare diseases, i.e. the orphan drugs. And they changed the rules, making them quicker, faster. And then suddenly, there's now, today, 20 years ago there was hardly a single orphan drug approved anywhere in the world. Today, 2,500 orphan drugs in the FDA pipeline. And up here, 58% of all drugs approved last year by the FDA were orphan drugs. It's a pretty good space to be. A little quick bit in orphan drugs, why are they? Basically, if you get approval, you've guaranteed 7 years exclusivity in the USA, guaranteed 10. You can charge, this is a bit naughty, you can charge 4.5 times. On average, they're 4.5 times more expensive. You get a big priority review voucher that can be sold for up to 300 million if you get approved. Trials are tiny, 65% smaller. And the real one is Americans are ahead of us. There's 520 orphan drugs FDA approved in America today. They can be brought simply to Europe. No clinical trials, just need some approval process. There's only 180 in Europe. So that's kind of where you see, it's an interesting space. Very quickly, don't want to be keeping you too late. This is, look, what we're doing. We're putting together a high margin pharma services company and adding 2 digital offerings. This is the virtual rep and the genomic database. But what we've got over here, Open Orphan, purely opportunist, left the board of Amrit. The guys are doing a fantastic job. They were developing drugs. I knew nothing about how to run clinical trials. I'd only get in the way. Some people say they kicked me off the board. Some people I'd say left the board. I'd joke and answer that. But I left as second biggest shareholder, sold very few shares. I think they're doing a great job, but they've de-risked it. That's Amrit. I thought I'd take the knowledge that they taught me, I knew damn well of it, and set this up. And we put Open Orphan, small services company providing services. We acquired Venn. It's a struggling life science company on AIM. It did 14.5 million last year. It did 16 million the year before, 18, never made money. It actually, you have to work hard at losing money, not making money in the pharma services business. They did it. We bought them very cheap. I'll show you how we did it very quickly. It was undercapitalized, never really raised proper money, struggled. We paid 4 million for it. Market cap was, the share price was 1.2p, market cap 1 million when I got involved last Christmas. Tried to fix it, didn't get there. Suspended the share price in May when it was 2 million. We increased it to 4, which the price is 2.4p. Raised 4.5 million on the 28th of June and relisted it at 5.6. The goal was recapitalize it, restructure it, make it profitable, and this is the one. And this is anybody looking to get involved in this company, and this is the real bet. If we can't do this, do not invest in Open Orphan. We have to try and get it re-rated. Open Orphan has now, last year run rate, 14.5 million revenues. Most of our peer group in this high margin consulting trades at 2 to 3 times sales. We're currently trading about 1. We are fixing. Venn is still not fixed. We're working over the next weeks and months to try and knock it in shape, stop the losses. But our belief is at 14.5 million sales, we're currently about that 14 or 15 million market cap. So we're trading at 1 time sales at the moment. And even so our belief is our market cap should at least double. Is that going to be 3 months, 6 months, 12 months? And then the bigger piece, we're going to launch these additional services, basically Orphan Drug, the digital platform, 2 of them, the virtual rep, and more importantly, the genomics database. Interesting thing about Venn, look at the customers they have. Janssen, which is part of Johnson & Johnson, Prometheus, Boehringer Ingelheim, huge German, GMAB, Servier, huge French, Galapagos, Pharming, very large Dutch, all very large European pharma companies. We had to try and acquire them slowly, we kill it. So we acquired a company with loads of customers, good revenues. And what we now do is try, we say, and cross-sell some of our digital services to those companies. We're also, to grow any more than 20 or 30% would kill us organically. And if you run your own business, to grow more than 20 or 30%, it is difficult. So we set a target. We're going to bolt on 1 or 2 more companies with decent revenues. We set ourselves a target of adding 30 million in high margin revenues within the next year or 2. They don't have to be orphan. It's just consultancy services. We'll have because we've got the orphan framework around it. So add revenue, increase the margin, and then we're trying to acquire these companies at 1 time sales. And ultimately, we're trying to then get ourselves re-rated because all our competitors, small, listed and private pharma consulting companies, trade at 2 times revenues or 3. Standalone little ones, you can get them for 1. So it's a valuation arbitrage. And there's no rocket science. We bolt a couple of these together. We take out the back office costs, and then we try and sex them up with the 2 digital platforms. And that's what we're saying. We're combining high margin pharma services, no risk. It's not going to get up 5x, but at least it's hopefully not going to half. And add on the digital offerings. What are the 2 digital offerings very quickly? The first one, and this slide comes up a few times, the virtual rep, is basically some pharma companies are doing this, but traditionally pharmaceutical companies, like the oil and gas companies and like the tobacco companies, they make a lot of cash. If you make a lot of cash, you're not killing yourself to innovate, you're not bringing in change. So we've got a digital platform where we have basically the contact details of 4,000 physicians across Europe who prescribe orphan drugs. And we have a little call center in Dublin. We connect them with pharmaceutical companies and charge a lot of money. And we basically send out a pack, send an email, but this is what we set up a conference call, a webinar with the consultant doctor and the pharmaceutical company, and we do the handover. And we charge them a lot of money for that. That's the virtual rep. We cut the sales rep out, and then the pharmaceutical company has a direct contact to the physician, and off they go. We never touch the drug. Most other industries do this every day of the week. Pharmaceutical companies, this is kind of new to them, strangely. The second piece of the sexing up the services, and what we're trying to do, why we say sexing up, and Tony Berger murdered for that word, is that, but basically pharma consulting is kind of boring, high margin, you can't double or triple. But if we add a few more to them, we can grow much faster, and we just add the digital platforms. This platform is particularly exciting, the genomics database platform. Traditionally, and what my learning 3-4 years ago with Joe Wiley and Rory and Amrit, they were saying, look, we've got to own the drugs, we've got to own the drugs, a bit like our colleagues earlier. But most drugs, so many drugs, not all drugs, have a gene therapy application or look at them. So the genomic, you want to see what is the genomics. So our belief now, if we can own this database of genomic data, it's not quite as valuable, but it's getting as valuable. If you own the data that helps pharmaceutical companies make drugs, that's got an intrinsic value. And some of us would say that's more valuable than owning a drug. So how are we doing that database? Basically, our colleague Maurice Tracy did this previously at GMI. They went off and harvested the data, created it, did the gene sequences. Instead, GDPR in Europe, pain in the ass for anybody got a business. However, everybody in the room tonight can go home and write a letter to your dentist tomorrow and say, dear dentist, under GDPR rules, I would like a copy of my dental records, my x-rays, because I gather you've got them on digital. Your dentist has 30 days and he has to send you a copy of your patient data. It's a pain in the ass for him. If he doesn't, after 30 days, you write again, dear dentist, you have 30 more days, otherwise I report to the data commission and you're out of business. So what we're doing here is rare disease patients across Europe have lots of genomic data because the kids are sick, the parents are trying to find out what's wrong with them. They do loads of genetic. So a lot of rare disease patients have this data. It's sitting in the hospital. They don't know. Under GDPR rules, those kids own that data, not the hospital. And all we're doing here, we will never sell the data, we'll never broker it, never leave it. We just host it. We tell the patient advocacy groups, who are charities, tell your patients, send your data, use our paperwork to our server. We will never let it leave our server. We will host it, corral it. We allow pharmaceutical companies to examine it, and we charge them a lot of money. They can never take the data. They can play around with the genome, do the full analysis, and we'll split the revenue share with the patient advocacy group. So we've now got 400 sales reps across Europe called patient advocacy groups. They're saying, wow, these guys can do a revenue share and they'll speed up development. And the big part is DNA at the moment. Your genome is like your fingerprint. People have been given away and say, oh, there's only one fingerprint in the world like that. I really shouldn't give it away. So what we're trying to do is we're never letting the data leave our server. If the patient or the kid, I want my data back, one click, data goes back, delete. It never leaves the server. I think that's the critical part. Morris's last company made a lot of mistakes. It sold for about 500 million, but they got caught up in GDPR. So this one's been built. GDPR is our friend. If it was general population, most people say, I couldn't be bothered to send my data. But if it's rare disease, they're sick kids, the parents are very motivated. Here, take our data. Have a look at it, try and find it. So it's quite simple. Anybody can copy this, but there's nobody copying at the moment. And bear in mind what I said, we're just pulling this together very quickly, taking a couple of services, company already have got 2, put them together, add this to it, and the plan would be, we would hope and expect, you either get consolidated, you consolidate, or you get consolidated out. And this is the piece that makes us very interesting for somebody wanting to buy something of more substance. We believe this will ensure Open Orphan disappears within 18 months. You know where that goes. It's not disappearing in ether, it gets bought, basically. Very quickly, digital health data. The platforms are currently one of the hottest. You hear loads of them. And all we're doing, this entire platform cost us 1 million to develop. I paid most of the money to develop it because we just put it together. We copied Morris's old one. We're not paying for the data. And we've just put it, it's one of the simplest business models I ever saw. And that's it. There's loads more of them. Conscious of time, I don't want to dwell. So that's that. Healthcare data, rare disease patients' data. The pharmaceutical will pay lots of money. There's loads of stats on it. So we believe all we need is 10,000 patient records. And there's 30 million rare disease patients in Europe. So we need 10,000 scattered across Europe. We have a bunch of pharmaceutical companies who said, get 500 patients in your database, we'll start paying you money. In summary, we would say this, wouldn't we? We're a compelling investment case. But basically, the management team own over 30% of the company. I personally put in 2 million of the company. 300,000 of it has gone into the IPO. We're all locked up for 3 years. And we're hoping to hell with the company sold long before that. The 3 of us, and if anybody's interested, you need to look at the 3 of us. We know there's chickens. I'm 54, Morris is 56, and Brenton's 67. So we kind of, if we made massive money in our previous one, maybe Joe and Rory might make us all rich in Amrit. We'd give it up, but we haven't. But this is, we believe, our roll of the dice now to make a substantial amount of cash for ourselves, and more importantly, for our investors. So we basically were saying, We have a track record of building successful companies. None of them successful enough that I wouldn't be standing up here trying to do another company. We're targeting the orphan drug because it's fast growing, it's sexy, it's interesting. And we've branded the company Open Orphan, opening European markets for orphan drugs. It's designed to be attractive from day one, that big pharma say, oh, that ticks a lot of our boxes. It has a clear four-pronged strategy. It's basically services, bolt-on then, do the digital platform, do the genomic database. We're just basically rolling these out to existing customers. And finally, we're looking to generate very much focused on shareholder returns, revenues, profits, rising share price. And I say we got the share price, we IPO'd at 5.6 in June. We got a bit overactive in July. It ran up to 8.4, 40-50% uplift. We got our head down quietly in August to try and get with it. I'm back. You can see I'm doing a lot of retail client engagement in the next 3 or 4 months. And one thing we're saying, we are not raising money, and that's not typical, ramp the share price up and then raise money. We raised enough money. We're doing acquisitions. So around the turn of the year, we're doing an acquisition. We're not paying cash, we're paying paper. So the stronger our share price is, the less equity we give away. And that's why I did 2 tonight. I'm doing another one tomorrow night. We want to just generate value in our share price, and that's our blood going forward. We'll use our equity to acquire 1 or 2 acquisitions, and it's game on at that. We're also putting our money where our mouth is. We're saying we will have a dividend within 2 years if we're generating cash, making profits, and we're not reinvesting. All the investment's done, the 2 databases are built, so we want to pay a dividend. And we've been very careful how we say this, but there's a clearly defined exit strategy post-phase, post-scale up. We have a good few staff that don't like hearing, oh, Cathal, you're buying us, now you're selling us, what are you doing, customers? So we're saying, live with your own imagination, what's going to happen if I have a attention span of a gnat. Within 12 or 18 months, I certainly don't want to be driving this, or like either somebody else, like a Joe and Rory doing it, and bringing the 300 or 400 million, or to be gone. Would any further ado, hand over maybe to questions?
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. That's Cathal with a disarmingly direct approach to how he's going about building the company. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks.
Questions? Yep. One right at the front.
Just give us a bit more flavour about these acquisitions at 1 times earnings. What's the motivation of the seller? Is there an earn-out? Are they important to the business, or can you just strip everything out apart from the product?
Yeah, Keith, good question. First of all, we're not paying cash. What happens if you pay cash to somebody? They walk out the door and you never see them again. You end up carrying the baby. We're paying stock. And that's why we started to engage with the market. We want to drive our share price up in the next 3 or 4 months. We're paying equity. And it's a very simple form. There's hundreds, if not thousands, of these small consultings over here. It's very easy to get to 3, 4, 5 million pharma revenues as a one-man show with 10 staff. Getting to 10 million is really difficult. Getting 20 million is impossible. So we can pick them up for about 1 times revenue. When you're slightly bigger, where we claim we are, 15, 20 million revenues, we're rated at 2 to 3 times revenue. So that's the re-rating. So we can actually say, look, we'll give you 1 times revenue. You get it over 3 or 4 years. You get a small amount of equity up front, and it is equity, not cash. After 12 months, you get another strip of equity. After 24 months, more equity, and after 36. And each time those equity strips is locked up for 24 months. And we would hope after 24, 36 months, the company's going to higher, better things. So, and there's a lot of them. So really, their valuation arbitrage on their own, they're not particularly attractive. There's nobody looking for them. If we can put a bunch of them together, and the target is to get to 40 million revenues, then we're kind of interesting. We're still microscopic, but we get 40 or 50 million revenue, which isn't hard, 2 acquisitions. Like we've guided the market, we are doing something, all going well around Christmas. Does that answer your question?
Okay.
Thanks.
Yes, one here.
I guess a question to all of you, just to address the elephant in the room a bit. We've heard from some quite smart, very smart people this evening, but Martin's point, one in 100 of these companies is successful. Clearly quite a speculative thing to invest in any one of these, although they all may be good prospects. Is there a way to de-risk that investment or pool it, or rather than put a little bit in all these companies and hope they get 1,000 times growth or something? Is there a way to buy a fund of all these sorts of companies, or any other ways you suggest, so it's not such a risky proposition for a retail investor?
We better not start with Cathal. Let's ask Martin that.
Yes, is the answer. We don't have investment trusts in quite the same way, but there are quoted companies, for example, IP Group, Arix Biosciences, BB Biotech. So there are a few funds that you can go for where the risk is clearly much broader.
Just ask the other two briefly. Are you happy to work with those companies? Because obviously they can be pretty brutal as to whether they'll support you or not.
Well, yeah, they invest, IP Group invest in startups, private, some take them public. We've never had their investment. In years gone by, I had some Novartis VC money, but of course, yeah, I think when you're especially in the startup phase of a biotech, you hunt for money, and IP Group would, people like Woodford, of course, as well, historically, which is...
Yes.
Yeah, well, is it...
Draw a veil over that.
Well, yeah, everyone's been very negative, but there's a huge amount of money has gone to work, and it delivers drugs for some of it. So if you're, not with an orphan disease and one of the Woodford companies saves your child, then, perhaps you won't be negative.
Yes.
So I think
Tim, you want to add anything there?
Yeah, I'd say the same. And if you're trying to raise money, as certainly I've done at Oxford Biomedica many times over, you take the money from where you can get it, provided that investor doesn't perhaps have too big a chunk and therefore got their claws. I think one of the problems with Woodford is he did take some very, very big stakes in companies, 30, 40%. And now, those companies have got a problem.
Yes.
So I think if you're desperate, you perhaps you get that situation on. But if you could take somebody's money and that they've got 1 or 2%, it's not really a problem for you as long as you've got the cash in the bank.
Okay, we're almost at the end of our time. Take one more question from the floor. Anybody else? At the front here.
Thank you. Open Orphan, very interesting idea. You don't have clinical risk. Your service business, volume-driven, efficiency, and clearly some very interesting digital data proposals. So what are the risks for Open Orphan? Because clearly it's not clinical. The other guys have
it's like the interview question.
Been running around for many years. They still need to raise money. They still need to prove their products. You raise money and you're running, and you don't need to hopefully raise anytime soon.
Yeah, simple answer to that. You're investing in myself personally, Brendan and Morris. We've over a half net worth tied up in it. I think the answer was very valid. A year ago, I had over half my net worth tied up in Amryt. I kept thinking, I just tossed a coin. Amryt is a fabulous company. Phase 3 readout. If it's success, we would double. If it's failure. But how they mitigate the risk, they went off and did a huge transaction. They bought a company with 150 million in sales, and it was kind of roll the dice. In ours, look, basically, it's purely opportunist. I just thought in Amryt was too high risk. 50-50.
Can you be opportunist with 4 different legs?
Well, so no, we should say 4. It's not really.
Yes.
It's really it's one leg. We're picking up a number of services company that's been rebranded. Never mind the prawns. It's roll up a couple of services companies and add on the virtual sales rep as an offering, and have the genomic database. And we'll be very honest. That's sexing the services company up. Services companies are not sexy, but the good part is, it's very hard to half the sales. If you've done 14 million last year, it's very hard to do 7. You really have to work at that. We've got 100 different clients. So I think, look, to answer the question about it is that, look, we're hoping to grow substantially in the next 6 or 12 months. A few acquisitions. Will we half in price? Hopefully not. Will we double? Hope we will. But we won't go up 5x. The beauty about people want to invest in any of these, if you get an FDA approval, there's 5x. So I think to answer the other question here, if I was an investor, you put it in safe shares, and then you allocate some to oil and gas and some to the biotech, and the way you avoid getting blown up is a little strip across a few of them. But if you think about it, a biotech can give you 5x. We won't give you 5x. We might double your money or more, but we hopefully won't half it. But if you're going to try and get 5 times your money, you have to be honest to yourself. And I think that's where Woodford went wrong. Like, a big thing was Woodford. Where did Woodford make all his money in his original high-income fund? Cigarettes. They paid a guaranteed dividend for 20 years of 6%, and they grew at 6%. And when he went wrong, and that's where he was involved in the broker, when he went wrong, he went to GSK and Pfizer, 6% dividend, and grew at 6%. He said, wow, this is really easy. And being honest, I just think Woodford got greedy. He then strayed away from the high income, cigarettes, it's like it threw off tons of cash, big dividend, GSK, Pfizer. And then when their dividend tailed off some years ago, he said, oh, I'm a genius. whatever, and I'll go into biotech where there's no revenue, no dividend, and he was looking for the 5x. And I think that's where dividend went right for. I think he was a genius when he stuck to high income stock tracking. And really, we're providing the picks and shovels to all these types of companies. He went into the cold face.
Okay, well, Cathal Friel, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
So, we've heard a terrific range of ideas. Obviously, none of these are, don't treat them as investment advice. Clearly, you need to make your own decisions, do your own research. But it's been brilliant to hear from all these guys tonight. So thank you very much indeed, all of you, for being with us. I'll just mention our next investment event, which is oil and gas, an old favourite for LSE users. And we think we'll have Echo Atlantic will be one of the companies which has been very much of interest in the news at the moment. Thank you very much indeed for coming. Please join us for refreshments. That event, by the way, on November the 12th, so maybe see you again. Thank you very much indeed.